Okay, I went into the Dollar Tree, got some medicine, right? Got some allergy relief, got some lip moisturizer, and the nasal spray. Okay, so yeah, I couldn't leave there without buying me a kickstart. I couldn't give me another kickstart. Alright, I just couldn't leave without getting a kickstart. Whew. I'm almost upset at myself because I am out here during rush hour. You know, I know better than to be out here during rush hour. These people are angry. They are angry that they had to go to work. They're angry about the traffic. They're angry that, yeah, they don't get paid enough, whatever. Right? But they're angry about something. Like I said, the speed limit is actually 40. People are actually going about 50. There's still ice on the road that hasn't melted. Any of them could slide, with the wink of an eye. Okay? The blink of an eye. So I'm on my way back home. I'm glad I got out because I definitely I was going to try to just lay in the bed all day, because it just felt cold. It just felt cold. It's 50 degrees now, but all morning it was cold. And so of course I went back to sleep. And I don't mind catching up on my sleep. And then I told myself, maybe next week when it sort of, gets a little normal outside, I'll start going back to try to do the senior center gym. Maybe start trying to do that, right? Maybe lifting of some heavier weights, can help me, on my quest to try to stay healthy. Now, one of the things that I know I had asked my daughter, right? My daughter does not exercise, right? Like I said, she's about 6 feet tall. She may get smaller, as a result of bone loss and not treating herself right. Because in our society, unless you're the one of the Victoria Angels, nah, being tall is too intimidating to men. Okay, let's keep it real. Now, I have been watching some women who were over 6 feet. I think they were like 6'6" and 6'9", and just watching them, they weren't fat. I don't know how much they weighed, but they weren't fat at all. They were just big. And I was watching how, people would treat them, how the men would compete, with their height, because they were intimidated by the women being taller than them. So, and the type of thing that they got going on right now is just, we're just way out of proportion. I mean, to me, it makes sense to have, maybe a woman that's, between like 6 inches to 8 inches, shorter than you, right? That way, when you're having sex, you can still kiss at the same time. If you have somebody that, has more than a height discrepancy than that, you either have to have sex or you have to kiss. You can't do both at the same time unless, she's a gymnast and can fold herself up. I'm serious, right? Because, when there's that much of a height discrepancy, you're not going to go walking up to him and just give him a kiss, right? If there's like 6 inches of height difference, a woman can put on a 5-inch pair of heels or even a 3-inch pair of heels, and swagger sexily up to him and, and kiss him without having to ask for permission. Can sneak a kiss on him. Otherwise, she has to make this big production of asking him, come here. Come down here. Ooh, let me get out of here. Ooh. There's a whole trail of snow going up this little hill. I don't want to go up it. Yeah. So I'll just go ahead and change the subject and get off of the sex thing and, the height differences and stuff, and how I think it's ridiculous, right? Like when you would see somebody that's over 6 feet, right? They're over 6 feet, but they have to have them a woman that's, 4'11", right? Honestly, it brings that, that pedophile mentality, right? If you're with a man, who has to have a woman that, gets Brazilian waxed, that also is that pedophilia mentality. Nobody wants to say it, but it's true. Now, I don't know any men that would go and have all of their hair off of their genitalia pulled off with wax. I don't. I mean, at best, they'll just have a close shave. That's at best, right? They're not sitting up here trying to be, smooth as a baby's bottom. Yeah. I'm kind of getting weird, right? But it's not weird. It really isn't weird. And it just, how are you a traditional man, and you want your woman to to be 5'4", under 100 pounds, and no hair on her body, including a Brazilian wax. I mean, what is that? It looks like a immature child. right? And me, when I was growing up, I thought men were attracted to, development, right? I thought they was attracted to women who had curves and that was growing breasts. But I didn't know there was a whole other population of men who were like, I'm not attracted to that. I'm attracted to a woman that looks like a boy. I'm attracted to a woman that doesn't have, titties and, stuff like that. All right, let's get off of that. Anyway, because men, they have all kinds of insecurities when it comes to their bodies and their performance as effective and efficient love makers, to the point where they're like, I don't make love, I have sex. Let me get off of this. Right? I don't even want to talk about it anymore. Because why? Talk about it. Why? Damn, that's a pretty BMW there. Woo. Caught my eye from way over here. So I started feeling a little defeated today. I did. I was feeling very defeated when I was looking out the window and just staring out the window and watching how many people were speeding down the highway, breaking the law, and they feel like that it's okay, and it's not okay. The only time they'll even possibly feel like it's wrong is if they get caught with a ticket, and even then they may not feel like it's wrong. They probably won't even pay for the ticket, right? They'll go down to court and try to fight the ticket, even though they were speeding, right? And the reason why they'll do that is the hopes that, the police department, won't show up to court. Yeah, this guy here, he was speeding right around me, and we're now side by side. At the light. So, yeah. And I'm pretty sure he doesn't live in this neighborhood. He probably slows to the speed limit in his neighborhood. But now more than ever, it's more obvious, who's a traditional husband and who is not, right? When they took out, the middle class, poor men cannot be traditional, period. They cannot, right? If somebody knows how a poor man can be a traditional husband, explain it to me. Right? The only way that a poor man can be a traditional husband is neglecting the fact that his wife and his family have needs. And he's like, neglectful to the point where he's in complete denial of their needs. And he feels like if he can deny their needs, then, the needs don't exist. That's not a traditional husband. Okay? It's just not. Right? This would be the same traditional man who, on one hand, will tell his kids and family to go and beg for some money and then get mad when he feels embarrassed that another man will give, his family money, and can't possibly believe that another man would give his family money without wanting something from his family, like sex. Okay? Because that's how they think. Because they're cheap. So then this traditional man, will try to beat the wife or the kids, whatever, telling them that, what did they, they must have did something to get money from that man, Like I said, there's no such thing as a poor traditional man. And then some of them actually will exploit their own kids, which you see that happening in Africa to this day, right? Those men over there, they don't have like jobs, and their society isn't built up like it is over here. So when they can't feed their kids, they definitely can't send their kids to school because their school costs them money, and if they're not a man who can even lease out some land to grow some crops, and had the kids and the whole family working in the fields with him, it's just this whole, can he get rid of the kids some kind of way? And that brings me back to that video where I seen this man was sitting up there talking about, where's my daughter? I gave my daughter to some Somalians, who were supposed to take my daughter up to Turkey so she could be an immigrant and do agricultural or immigrant work, right? No papers, no visas, nothing. Right? The men that he gave his daughter to, he don't know who they are. It's just, the weirdest, strangest thing. And yet, those African men, their marriage is not even jumping a broom anymore. Their marriage is, I guess just laying somebody down anywhere they can. And that's marriage. And then they're off to another marriage. And they don't care if the woman that they laid down has birth control. Or even if she's been cleared with a clean bill of health that she's not carrying any STDs. Why? Because the country's too poor to do that. They don't have the kind of systems that we have in place over here. So it blows my mind when I sit up here and I see, Western men listening to these third world men who escaped who escaped their country some kind of way, right? Abandoned their many families, their many children, right? Might have brought one family with them, and it's just crazy. It's just absolutely insane that they would even listen to that being a form of life. The only good thing about Africa is that, they do have a lot of agriculture, and, their hunting is only regulated on, the reserves of land, that they use for like safaris and zoos and stuff like that. Quiet as it's kept, a lot of the animals that used to live, that typically live in Africa, are on the extinction list. Which makes me think about, the soil here in Texas, right? The soil here in Texas, a lot of it is clay, right? It kind of looks sort of red. And then, it gets mixed in with sand some kind of way, right? I don't know if it happens from precipitation and the sands, mixed with, the clay, because I remember one time I was filming and I'm like, why is the rain red, right? And then as the rain started to dry up, I started seeing some pooling of sand, and I'm like, well, where did the sand come from, right? So, I barely know the basics when it comes to